This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
A good Thursday morning to you on this, the 1st of September. Wow. Excited to be with you. Cosmologist Katie Mack. She's a pilot. She's an author. She's a TED talker. She's remarkable. The author of The End of Everything is going to join us to talk about this Artemis mission, NASA's mission to put astronauts back on the moon for the first time in 50 years. And Katie, if you follow her on Instagram or on Twitter at AstroKatie, you know she's a great follow. Her ability to break down really high-level stuff like the origins of the universe and what ultimately will kill us all, she can put that into terms that we can all understand, and I'm really excited to get her take on the significance of this NASA project. Thanks for those of you that typically join us live for being patient this morning and granting us an extra half hour. Technical producer John Hicks was here patiently waiting as our family participated in our traditional family walk on the first day back to school.
And thank you, because we had our Hedge Pod fantasy football draft last night, so I was up late. I needed that extra sleep.
How did you do?
I did okay. Well,
yeah, I guess we'll find out.
I got a B rating on Yahoo Sports. I don't know what that means. This is my first fantasy draft ever. Kirk Cousins is my quarterback. I got a B rating, so I'm not sure what that means, but Walk said I did surprisingly well.
Andrew Walker, the host of The Hedge. Yeah, you can subscribe to that anywhere you get your podcast. Check out thehedgepod.com. Would it make you feel any better if I told you that I don't know what team Cousins plays for?
That's okay.
Okay, I can throw a spiral, but I don't know anything about the NFL. Like, I know how the game works, but I don't know anything about the players.
Same thing. Like, I watched the Dolphins only, and then playoffs in the Super Bowl, right? So I was kind of like, I did a couple mock drafts. I had to do my homework.
Yeah,
but it was pretty fun. Looking forward to it.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Well, this is your first foray into fantasy football, right? Yeah, good stuff.
I think Walks was just surprised I didn't take like Tom Brady first pick or something.
Right. Yeah, that would be my move. I recognize that guy's name. He might be the MVP.
Where's Gronk?
He's like 45, man. Not the best first pick. Okay, I digress. Katie Mack in just a second. Then I'm going to tell you about this T-shirt that I'm wearing if you're watching us on YouTube. Yeah. John, I'm sort of breaking a television rule here in wearing pure white on set under studio lighting. It's what you would call, it's coming across very hot.
Very hot.
But it doesn't matter because this is all about an initiative coming up on Sunday, September 11th called Be More Kind Day. And Real Talk is really proud to be supporting it, and we're going to tell you all about that after we talk to Katie a little bit later on in the show. We're going to get into what you told us you would do with a spare $13 billion. That's what the province of Alberta's surplus is looking like. It's what the government's expecting, and so now they're talking about how are they going to spend it, or how are they going to reinvest it, or are they going to pay down debt, or are they going to refund senior supports, or are they maybe going to do something for AISH recipients, those that are living on disability, and of course, meager income month to month. These are all avenues that you shared with us by way of responses to my tweet of what you would do with the $13 billion. It's always I don't know if it's fun, but it's always an interesting and enlightening exercise to participate in. So we'll get to some of what you had to say. And then, because the show is off tomorrow, we will not have live Real Talks on Friday nor Monday. Labor Day. We'll be back at it live Tuesday. Can't wait to hit the ground running for September, for the fall. We've got a big fall plan for the show. Thursday, today, will be the last show of this week, and that means that we're going to wrap it up with an early edition of Trash Talk. And you may not be surprised to hear that there's a couple of submissions that have something to do with what went down in the city of Grand Prairie last weekend when a hulking bully tracked down the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and dropped some C-bombs and some F-bombs on her and raised his shoulders and backed her into the elevator. So we're going to get to what you had to say about that. Obviously a serious situation, but when we invite you to blow off steam about something that pisses you off, you take us up on the opportunity. So we're going to deliver that today. Looking forward to that edition of Trash Talk later in the show. Before we get to Katie Mack, I want to let you know that this interview coming up is presented by our sponsors, and that includes the Covenant Foundation Lottery. They want to remind you that their deadline is today for the bonus prize. Thursday, September 1st is the bonus prize deadline. If you want to win that Tesla Model S or $100,000 cash, That draw is coming up in a couple of weeks, September 15th. And then the grand prize, this beautiful $2.2 million dream home. John and I just sit here. We just keep watching the video, John, imagining what we would do in this palace if we won it.
Too big for me.
Yeah, I know.
I'd rent out half of it.
Can you imagine like having to wash the floors and vacuum in that place?
It comes with all these. You got to get a cleaning service. You got to get a gardener.
I think what you do is you let your buddies move into the basement, but then they have to clean it. You say your job's to keep it clean, but you can live in the basement rent free. It would be like Entourage 2.0.
It is incredibly gorgeous. So this is 2 blocks from our home. We went by, me and my wife, and she just drooled over this. So.
Stunning. 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 5,400 square feet, furnished, ready to move in. CovenantFoundationLottery.ca or 1-888-944-2774. Our friends at Park Power want to remind you that they feel your pain. They know that the cost of living is on the rise. They know that a big part of that is utilities. They have variable rates. They have locked-in rates. They have different options, and you can compare their rates on electricity, natural gas, and internet by visiting parkpower.ca today. It takes like 5 minutes or less. If you want to sign up, take your business to them, bundle all 3 services together. It's going to cost you fewer administration fees, and the promo code 2022-RealTalk is going to knock $70 off your first bill. Hey, this might be one of your last weekends. There's the sense of urgency on this one. If you're the type of person that's looking for maybe a solution, you don't want to idle your vehicle in front of your house for 2 minutes every single morning. Once the temperature starts to drop, why not get natural gas piped out to your garage, put a thermostat and a natural gas heater in there, keep it at like 6 degrees through the winter. It'll be perfect, right? That all starts with excavation, and Eden Landscaping can do it, and they can do it before the snow flies. Go to landscapeedmonton.ca today to make contact and get a quote on what that project might look like for you. All right, so we were supposed to talk to our next guest. I'm a huge fan of hers. I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to spell that out and say it to her face. We were going to talk to her on Monday, and that's when Artemis was set to launch this new NASA project everybody's talking about. Katie's going to give us the details here. The first one unmanned, but there will be astronauts heading back to the moon for the first time since the Apollo missions. Katie Mack is a cosmologist, a pilot. She's a TED Fellow. She's the author of The End of Everything, making her return to Real Talk. Katie, thanks again for rescheduling with us. Of course, this mission delayed on Monday. Engine issues. Do we know what was going on there now?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I'm going to have to gently correct you. It's not unmanned, it's uncrewed. The NASA changed the terminology for that in the early 2000s.
Thank you. Oh, like you mean to remove
really
the gender
slow,
angle of it, do you mean?
Yeah.
Uncrewed.
Yeah,
I learned something in the first 9 minutes
uncrewed.
of the show. Thank you.
Yeah, it's and for Artemis as a mission that's a little bit relevant because one of the goals of the Artemis mission in general is to get the first woman to the moon. So we're not sure how that's going to go yet in terms of who's going to be selected or the process there, but that is one of the key things that people talk about in NASA about Artemis. But yeah, so the problem with the engine. There was a coolant issue. So there are these 4 engines on the main core stage that are meant to sort of provide the main thrust for the rocket, and one of them had a temperature issue, and it wasn't entirely clear whether that was just a bad probe or if the engine really wasn't cooling properly. And in the end, they decided to call off the launch in order to fix that problem.
To state the obvious, these are things like we've seen with Challenger and other disasters where like just the tiniest little thing, it's like a bolt can be loose or some glue didn't dry the right way, and it could have disastrous consequences. So these missions and the scheduled launch times are always up in the air a little bit, right? Like we're looking at, I think, 2:17 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. They're hoping to send this up this time, but
Yeah.
You never really know.
Yeah, it's this is a test flight, right? So this is an uncrewed test flight. The idea is it's the first time this rocket will have ever flown. So there's lots of things that could go wrong, and the point of it is to see how it works. If this test flight goes well, then the next version will have people on it. So you really want to make sure that that you have the best chance to get the best information. And that means you don't want something that's going to destroy the mission so quickly that you won't even get any good data, right? If it's going to fail, you want it to fail in a useful way. And that means that you want to make sure you really think everything is going to go perfectly, get it into the air. And then if it does go well, then this mission is also important scientifically for its own purposes, right? So it's going to be going out to the moon. It's going to orbit the moon in a wide orbit, and it's going to take data while it's out there. It's going to carry with it a bunch of CubeSats to do other observations, and then the capsule, after it circles around the moon, it's going to come back and splash down. And that Orion capsule, the crew capsule, carries with it a couple of mannequins that have sensors that are going to be testing things like radiation, testing the stresses that the astronauts would be subject to in the real mission, in the crewed mission. And so there'll be tons of exciting data that come back from this once it launches.
Most people are going to hear this on the podcast, so they need to know that you haven't stopped smiling the entire time you've been explaining this to us, and my face is starting to hurt from smiling, listening and watching you. I'm also trying to figure out what mathematics are on the blackboard behind you. I don't know. I can't tell if that's wallpaper or real. I'm not smart enough to know the difference.
That's real science. That's a bunch of equations having to do with black holes from the early universe. So they're not relevant to this topic.
You were just something you were working on black holes before you checked in with us, eh?
Well, it's my office. That's where I do most of my work.
I love it.
So, I mean, it is an exciting mission. It's very exciting to be going back to the moon. Sending people. There have been a lot of robotic missions to the moon, and not all of them have been NASA. A lot of other countries have been sending robots and rovers to the moon, and there's been a lot of really interesting science coming from lunar observations, from satellites and things. But there haven't been people there for a very long time, and so this program, if it all goes well, will be sending people back to the moon, which is an exciting prospect. Now, it'll still be some time. These launch vehicles are not reusable, so you have to build the entire thing. It's this 32-story tall rocket with a tiny capsule on the top. It's got these booster rockets attached. That it's not reusable, so that means that you have to build a new one each time. They're expensive. They take a long time. So the first crewed mission, which will just be orbiting the moon and coming back, is going to be a couple years after this one, and then after that will be something where they can land. So it's a long-term thing, but we're getting going.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm frantically Googling as we're talking, and I'm trying to figure out. You just told me, it just blew my mind. It's a 32-story rocket.
It's a very tall rocket. Yeah.
And so
you should find some photos of people standing near it. It's massive.
Well, I'm trying to figure out if I think that's taller than the tallest building in the city that we call home. So that's perspective. I mean, that's pretty unbelievable stuff. Katie, you alluded to something, and that's that. The space race used to mean something different, and it was like there were national or international competition, right? It was kind of, I guess, mostly the Americans and the USSR and maybe China, right? But now it's like the landscape is like rockets are being tested all the time. A lot of them are owned privately, or it's SpaceX, and you got the Jeff Bezos thing I can't remember, and Richard Branson and NASA, and very different, to state the obvious, than the last time Americans were trying to get up to the moon.
Yeah, the landscape has changed a lot. There's certainly a lot more. There's a lot more international cooperation with the International Space Station. The Artemis rocket also has some components from ESA as well. So there is quite a bit more connection with between countries. A lot of more sort of sharing data, doing joint missions and things like that. There have been a number of joint missions for scientific purposes, as well as human space flight. And the private industry, the private space industry is getting very active as well. And so one of the big debates around Artemis is that the launch system, the rockets, is called the Space Launch System, is a project. It's a NASA project that's been very delayed, very expensive. It's gone through many years of small changes and sort of problems, and there's been a lot of debate about whether it's something that should be used by NASA, or if NASA should just be contracting with SpaceX, where SpaceX is developing they have the Falcon Heavy. They're developing the Starship program that could serve the same purpose if it all works out, and so there's a lot of debate around the sort of not quite politics of economics of the different approaches to spaceflight,
or like the mandate. Like, people, you've probably heard this all the time, and I apologize to come in here on a bit of a lowbrow angle. But, sort of the criticism of like, why do we need to go to the moon, or why do we need to explore space? And sometimes I think there's people can come up with really like tangible, practical, scientific or evidence-based arguments. And then a lot of times it's more of like an esoteric perspective, which also I think works. But when you're talking about billions and billions of dollars, then I hate to say it, but taxpayers feel like they're stakeholders in the project. Where do you land on whether or not public money and public agencies like NASA or government-funded agencies, Canadian Space Agency, should be involved in stuff?
Well, I one of the things I think is important to point out is that even if a rocket built by SpaceX were being used for this, it would be they would be a NASA contractor, right? So the money would still be taxpayer money, just going to a private organization instead of to NASA engineers. The NASA works. All of the government agencies work with private contractors in various ways to build pieces of the thing. And in this case, the Space Launch System has been characterized by a lot of people as a kind of jobs program in terms of like it's a way to keep aerospace jobs within the U.S. And so that's been a big debate. But this is something that has economic benefits for the people who are building the parts, the people who are working with these programs. So it's not clear cut. It's not like you just kind of dump money into it and it disappears into space. The money that's being spent for space programs is being spent on Earth, and people are doing real work on Earth. As for the whether it's worth it, whether it's the most economic approach, that's a whole other debate, and I don't want to get too deep into that because I don't know all the details there. But the benefits of space travel, there are certainly clear scientific benefits to exploring space in a lot of different ways. The scientific benefits of human spaceflight versus robotic space exploration. There are some things that only humans can do, or that humans can do much more efficiently. In terms of science, most of the sort of cost-benefit stuff would suggest just send a whole lot of robots and probes and don't send people. But I think that there are other benefits to sending people. One is that we do learn a lot about human biology through spaceflight. There are experiments that are being conducted on the International Space Station that are very important for biology, for material science, for a number of different things. There are benefits to having people living in space, having people working in space, and having people go places. But it's also just a human thing. Humans have an urge to explore, and I think that it's extremely inspiring to watch people walk on the moon. Like that's one of the things. So many people who got into science in the 70s and 80s, it was because they saw people walking on the moon. I mean, those kinds of things those things do have benefits. As for the cost benefit analysis, it's hard to say, but I will say that there's studies have shown that investments into NASA, investments especially into basic research, blue sky research with no applications, those have some of the best return on investments of anything you can put money into in an economy.
This is kind of a random. Have you seen the documentary Dave Not Coming Back? Have you seen it by chance? No. I just watched it like a couple of days ago, and I guess I don't have to really put out a spoiler alert because the title of the film kind of that is that is the spoiler. Okay. Dave Not Coming Back, but it's about these divers that descend to like unimaginable depths. I think it was like 270 feet or something wild. And ultimately some of these divers pay for it with their lives. And we look at people that like free climb Half Dome at Yosemite or things like this. And you wonder, why would you do these ice climbers, these documentaries? My hands sweat, my palms sweat when I watch them. You go, why would you do this? But it's the same thing, Katie, that you're talking about is like this need to explore and like what it does for us, not just the individuals doing it, but the society, the people on the planet. I mean, I'm sure that Americans to see the American flag on the moon was a big deal. But like even as a Canadian kid, just to see someone standing on the moon was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the flags thing. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see I roll my eyes a little bit on there. I find the flags thing a little
Sure.
bit silly, but yeah, I mean, seeing a human experiencing something through the experience of another person, that is affecting in a way that just pictures and data are not always quite the same. So it is an important thing that humans want to explore.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources at nasa.gov, and people can check them out. NASA's done these videos kind of answering, I guess, almost, the who, what, when, where, why kind of idea. They say why we're going to the moon, and then they talk about, why the moon? Why not another destination sort of idea? But I like this. They say we're going back to the moon, like you said, Katie, scientific discovery, economic benefits, and inspiration for a new generation of explorers. But they name it the Artemis generation, which is kind of cool because if you look at it, I mean, I guess I mentioned Challenger earlier. Everybody has their context of like when their timestamp was of when this really sort of seared itself into their hearts, really. For the people that are really interested in it. You're an expert in I guess sort of how we all got here and how it all got started and maybe ultimately how it will all end too. People can check out astrokatie.com, your book The End of Everything Astrophysically Speaking. Is there something in particular about the moon that could provide some value to how we understand our origins or our ultimate demise or some of the bigger promise that the universe might hold?
Well, the moon is a fascinating place for a number of reasons. It's really interesting for history of the Earth in an interesting way because the current theories of how the moon formed is that a sort of Mars-sized planetary body slammed into the early Earth, knocked a big piece off of it, and that piece sort of it was molten and coalesced into the moon. So the stuff the moon is made of is very, very similar to the stuff the Earth is made of because apparently we're all kind of part of the same body in the early solar system. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that can be learned about the history of the Earth by studying the moon. There's one thing that I find really awesome is that so I study kind of the early universe, the era when the first galaxies formed, way back in the day. And one of the ways that we study those things is through radio astronomy, through very long wavelength radio astronomy. It allows us to look at the hydrogen gas from which the first galaxies formed. It's really, really cool. But the problem is it's quite hard to do those studies from the Earth because there's a lot of radio frequency interference, and also because the ionosphere of the Earth actually makes it difficult at certain frequencies. So there have been a lot of proposals to put radio telescope arrays on the far side of the moon where there's no interference and there's no ionosphere. And so if we actually are able to do that, then we'll be able to kind of watch the first galaxy formation through these radio astronomy arrays by putting them on the moon. Or there's also been suggestions for orbiters going around the moon and taking data when they're on the far side. And so as a cosmologist, there is some really tantalizing real estate on the moon for doing some scientific work. But I mean, those are kind of far future things, but they could be really, really neat.
And you always kind of have to be looking far future, right? I mean, I feel silly. I can't remember the name of the new, what was the thing like a couple of months ago they went up there that now they say puts Hubble to shame, but there's like that whole other.
The JWST, the James Webb Space Telescope.
Right. And that's just like blowing people's minds, right?
Yeah.
But I remember when like Hubble images were coming out and it was like, whoa,
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, Hubble's still cool. Like, I don't want to,
Still cool.
don't want to diss Hubble. It's still up there. It's still doing awesome stuff. JWST it's giving us different data and much sharper images of certain things. But I mean, we're learning new things about the distant and early universe all the time, and it's a fascinating time to be working in this field.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know you well enough to ask you this. Based on your expertise, are you a religious person? Are you a spiritual person?
I'd rather not get into that. I have a sort of complicated history with
Okay,
all
fair,
of that.
fair. And I don't know you well enough to ask. That's actually a totally rude question. But I just always like people that have like, I think you, and when I was introducing you to our audience, I said one of the things I've loved about you and seeing your talks and the other stuff you've done and reading your writing is that you can take some like really high level stuff and kind of make it accessible to plebs like me. And so I'm always just curious in people's perspectives that have such a deeper understanding of what's going on, outside of planet Earth and the great beyond. It's the stuff I love, like hiking trails when everybody else has fallen asleep at the end of the night. You're staring up at the sky and just letting your mind run wild. You know what I mean? It's the best.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much. People talk about the overview effect, where astronauts, when they go into space and they see the Earth from above, and they get this feeling of like the connectedness of all people, and this feeling of how fragile and small we are in the vastness of space. I mean, I've never been to space. Maybe someday one can hope, but some of the studying astronomy, looking at those space images, I get that feeling too. That feeling of like, just an understanding of how insignificant we are in this vast, amazing place.
Yeah, I certainly the Canadian I'm about to mention is not the only one to have done this, but Commander Chris Hadfield, I think that was one of the reasons why his social media. I mean, he's a compelling guy, but his Instagram went to 1 million followers like fast because of the types of observations that you're talking about. Like he would send these images, if people remember, they can go back and look at them, and he would say like, this is the Côte d'Ivoire, or this is like whatever, this is Italy's boots or something. But then he would like have these really wonderful observations about it. You're a pilot, right? Is it on your list of, I mean, you've got several boxes ticked for someone that could qualify to go to space. Is that on your list?
Well, I've applied to the NASA astronaut program a couple of times.
Cool.
I made the first cut once, so there, the chances are not zero. They're very, very small. And as I get older, the chances are smaller. But now that I'm flying airplanes, I think they do. I think that they do appreciate pilots in the astronaut selection process, partially. I mean, it's not that flying a spaceship is anything like flying an airplane. That's not the thing. The reason that they appreciate pilots and mountaineers and divers and things, they like to see people who are doing something very technical, very complicated, involving lots of checklists, where if you screw up, you die, basically.
Yeah.
They want people who can work under pressure and do something that involves, a lot of situational awareness. And so I think that as I work, work through pilot skills and get more experience as a pilot, I definitely see why people who do that are valuable to the space program, because it can be very intense, and you do really have to be on top of things and be comfortable with checklists and technical details, and really, really being careful and aware.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Katie, we've already kept you way longer than we asked for. Let me make this last question. It kind of brings it full circle.
Okay.
And I appreciate you putting that on my radar about the change in language or vernacular with the uncrewed mission. And you'd mentioned that one of the interesting details of the Artemis mission is that NASA's hoping to put a woman on the moon for the first time.
Yeah.
As a woman working in STEM, that's obviously got to be huge, right? Is that sort of one of the bigger significant items, at least early in this mission for you?
Well, I think that it's very, I like it because I think that not because I particularly personally would feel very differently, but there were a lot of women who were very qualified for the Apollo missions. There were a lot of women who were in training, who were advanced pilots, who were, going through all of the same tests as the men in the Apollo era. And for essentially political and social reasons, they were not selected. And so I like that as the space programs all around the world are evolving, more women, more people of color are being included. And there's also new efforts to include to open access to space in a lot of different ways. There's a really interesting program to bring people with disabilities into space travel, and because essentially a disability you have on Earth might not be a disability in space. And so there's a lot of really interesting discussion about how physical differences can be advantageous or immaterial in space travel. And so there's a lot of effort toward just improving access to space travel in all sorts of different ways. And I think that's a really good and important thing to consider. And especially, as we talked about, one of the big purposes of human spaceflight is inspiration. And so people need to see people they can relate to in order, to maximize that inspiration. And so I do think it's important, who is chosen.
So true. Katie, it's honestly such a pleasure, such an honor every time that you gift us your time to come here on the show. And thanks for, your passion is contagious with Artemis and everything else. People need to make sure that they follow you on Instagram and on Twitter at AstroKatie, and check out astrokatie.com, where you can also order her book, learn more about the end of everything, astrophysically speaking. An astrophysicist, a cosmologist, an author, a pilot, and a great friend of Real Talk. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, you bet. You as well. How cool is that? Like, even her chalkboard behind her with like all the it is so cool. I'm like, that needs to be wallpaper.
As soon as she logged in, I was like, oh, maybe we'll get a little lesson here. And I was thinking during this, like every kid dreams when they're younger of going to space, right? And I remember when I was younger, I was like, oh, that's something I would do. But nowadays, like, have you tried a flight simulator for even just like flying an airplane? Like, you can do them on Xbox and all the game consoles now, but I did one a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow. Because I thought I was a technical guy. I think I'll stick to behind the mixing board.
You are a technical guy. It's like you're flying a plane every morning on this show.
I like how she brought that up, that, astronauts, it's another level. It's another level, and you have to pick those people who are not only calm under pressure, but can do those situational things, those checklists. Yeah. Because you make one wrong move, you flip one wrong button, it can lead to a series of events that just, So anyways, I did a flight simulator, and I realized, I could never be a pilot.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, like right out of the gates. And I really appreciate, we call it Real Talk, and I appreciate being corrected in interviews and people saying like, we don't really say that anymore. That's not really, I remember once someone saying, and I knew it the minute it came out of my mouth, I was like, ooh, I remember once saying something like someone was at the bottom of the totem pole. And right away I was kind of like, I don't know if we say that anymore. And then someone wrote in and said, A, we don't really say that anymore. But then pointed out, they said, B, what most people don't know about totem poles is that the figure on the bottom oftentimes carries the most clout or has the most significance or the most importance. So actually the phrase is off. Anyway, another one here. When unmanned came out of my mouth, just in the split second, kind of right away, it just kind of felt, I was kind of like, I wonder if and then she goes, I'm going to correct, and I knew right away, uncrewed, which makes perfect sense. And as I'm sitting there talking, I didn't want to get too off track on tangents, because I wanted to learn about Artemis, and Katie's we could talk to her for 3 hours, obviously. But even if you think of the phrase mankind. Yeah. And then probably the most famous phrase invoking the word mankind, which would be Neil Armstrong putting his boot print on the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Of course. I hope I didn't butcher that. Right? It's just, isn't it interesting? And then she talks about the women that were denied access to the program, deserving women. It reminded me of that movie. Did you ever see that movie, Hidden Figures?
I sure did. That was a great movie. Yeah.
Hidden Figures is such a good film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's women, in particular women of color, that were marginalized, essentially, frozen out, but behind the scenes, and it's a true story, played these these geniuses.
Doing all the calculations.
Just playing a huge role in these space missions. If you haven't seen Hidden Figures, put that on your must-watch list for this weekend and check it out.
I also like how she brought up the flag thing, because I've always thought that way since I was younger, too. I was always like, countries, they're kind of like just imaginary lines. Like, if you kind of do away with those.
Here we go.
No, I know. I'll get some comments. But I've always been like, flags and imaginary lines. I didn't really get it ever since I was younger, too. So I like how she brought that up and was like, I'm not really a fan of that either. The whole flag. We need to be more connected with everyone.
Well, and it's different if it's, because let me tell you, there are a lot of questions that end up on the cutting room floor that don't make it to the interview. And when she did roll her eyes at the flag, I said, even as a Canadian, for us, it was a person on the moon. It wasn't necessarily the flag. And then she kind of rolled her eyes. You could see it. And I was glad she was willing to make that comment. I thought there might be room to explore a comparison with Canada's claims in the Arctic.
Sure.
But I don't think so. Number one, because Canada does claim that and would fight for it. In other words, if there was Russian aggression in the Arctic, and we've seen it, and there's icebreakers up there, and there's and we don't know all the stuff that's up there, and NORAD and everything else, and but like it is on planet Earth still. So there is significance to it. Whether it's going to ultimately one day be shipping routes or whether there's oil up there somewhere, whatever it is, the sovereignty and the security, there are global implications. Planting your flag on the moon, like somewhere else in the solar system, is a little different. Like if the
Nobody owns
Chinese
that yet.
or Israel or like, Russia or someone went up and planted their flag on Venus and was like, it's ours. How would people respond?
That's exactly, I put myself in those shoes, like, whenever I watch, like, because all the old, like, Apollo movies and everything, they're so great, and I'm like, this is a little, probably triggering for everyone outside of North America, a little when you see those images.
But that's
right?
also part of the point, right? Like when Kennedy said we are going to go to the moon, it was about the United States getting there before the Russians. That
100%.
that was what it was about.
Yeah.
And it almost wasn't about going to the moon. It was like the moon was just the avenue for the American. It was like the same as like, a gold medal hockey game in the Olympics.
100%.
It's the same. It's just an avenue for people to be able to beat another country and then feel good about it for a while.
Well, we've moved on. The space exploration, a lot of collaboration now between countries, right? But I did like the little lessons she taught us today. You were talking about, things that, you say, and then you're like, I used to say spirit animal all the time. So that's another one that I stopped saying like 3 years ago because it's not really,
I like it. We're always
jive.
learning. We're always learning.
Teach us.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to learn. And then that way the kids will still let you talk to them at the dinner table at the family gatherings, right? If you keep learning. Brenda on our live chat says, Jespa, what's on your shirt? Well, is it two hands forming a heart? Brenda, thank you for asking. Sunday, September 11th is Be More Kind Day. This is in honor and in tribute to the great Frank Turner, singer-songwriter. My pal Darren at Arcadia Brewing Company established Be More Kind Day in our home city of Edmonton several years ago. It's a way to reach out to and support and be more kind to our fellow citizens, in particular the unhoused and people marginalized oftentimes, and for the most part, living in our city's downtown core. Be More Kind Day is an opportunity to throw some burgers on the grill, to hand out some fresh T-shirts like this one I'm rocking right here. You can see this Be More Kind Day. We've got 500 of those hitting the T-shirt printing presses. A way to just share the love. A way to, be more kind. And so here's the deal. We are proud at Real Talk, along with our partners at Ronan Consulting Group, to give you an opportunity to triple your donation today to the Boyle Street. Boyle Street Community Services does unbelievable work in Edmonton's city core and, of course, beyond. Thousands of people benefit from the amazing resources that they provide in otherwise very difficult circumstances. So if you go to boylestreet.org today or before Sunday, September 11th, and make a donation, make sure in the subject line of your donation you put Be More Kind. Okay? And when you do that, Real Talk and Ronan Consulting Group is going to match your donation up to $1,000. It's an opportunity to have your $20 become $60 or your $100 become $300. We want to remind everybody of the importance of being more kind. And that comes in this sense on Sunday, September 11th. It's Be More Kind Day. You can make your donation today at boylestreet.org. Real Talk and Ronan Consulting Group, in partnership with Arcadia Brewing Company, will match it up to $1,000. We talked money yesterday. The Alberta government announcing that they're expecting a $13+ billion surplus, $13.2 billion. They say the original estimate was $511 million. So this is a dramatic increase based in large part, for the most part, to increased resource revenues. If you're trying to cut through the noise, as we say, with regards to the politics of how this surplus wound up to $13 billion, I recommend checking out a Twitter thread from economist Trevor Tombe, who broke it all down yesterday in a way that's really understandable and cuts right to the point. So you can follow Trevor on Twitter, and maybe we'll get him on the show next week or the next couple of weeks. It's been a while. But I was talking about it with you yesterday, and I asked you on yesterday's episode, what would you do with an extra $13 billion? Alberta's government says it's going to use its budget surplus to pay off a bunch of debt. It'll direct a few billion. They say the finance minister, Jason Nixon, says it's the largest contribution ever to the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. And I asked if you think it's the wisest use of that windfall. And I wanted to get to some of the responses that you shared with us on Twitter. Bruce said, you got to account. He said, I would account for the $4 billion that I may have left in my other pair of pants. Of course, a great reference to the Alberta government's accounting around that COVID support. Gambit said healthcare, and then healthcare. Hans said, I would fund healthcare, I would fund education, and I would invest in innovation in our oil and gas sector, make it more environmentally responsible. I'd stop focusing on internal party problems and stop rage farming hate against our federal government. That from Hans. MLA Marie Renaud, she's an opposition MLA out of the city of St. Albert, said, I'm appalled that they didn't reverse their cuts from a few years ago to AISH. That's the assured income for the severely handicapped if you're living outside Alberta. For income supports and for seniors benefits. MLA Renaud says people are struggling to feed themselves and find safe places to live, and still this government pretends that everything is fine. The harm is real and the harm is growing. Yuri says, I would take that $13 billion and subtract all of this government's spending gaffes to determine what the surplus, if any, actually is. He says a good place to start might be $1.5 billion foolishly spent on the Keystone XL pipeline and some of the other loan guarantees that nobody in this government seems eager to talk about. Shara says, my school has 4.5 education assistants this year. We had 7 when I started 6 years ago. At one point, they had as many as 10. So school staffing is a real priority for a lot of you. Joa said, I'd love to see some of the money help municipalities with infrastructure costs, new water, sewer projects that can cost a fortune, maybe some facility upgrades, some road rehab, and community revitalization. Joa wants to see a reinvestment, obviously, not just in the infrastructure, but into the workforce as well. Scrapper D wants to see reversed cuts to AISH, income support, seniors benefits, and says we've also got to recruit more family doctors. And Alberta's former energy minister, Margaret McQuaig-Boyd, who's been a great friend of this show, chimed in as well. She said they should be taking, and keep in mind, this was her portfolio. Before, not finance, but energy. Okay, so you're talking to a former minister. She says they should be taking in a total of she said they should take in a total of around $24 billion this year in royalties, so they have some flexibility to pay debt, restore some funding, and invest in the Heritage Fund. To which Hillary replied, "What about AISH?" in all caps. And I'm not making light of that. People are advocates for those on AISH recipients are really, really, to be quite frankly, under-platformed. It's not talked about as much as it should be. You can imagine trying to get by, and I know that some audience members of this show are on AISH or do try to get by or are getting by on like $1,500 a month, but it's unimaginable these days with the rental market where it's at, with food prices where they're at. To say I feel your pain feels trite. But I'm glad to make that a part of this public conversation about what this $13 billion should go into. Halls says, many schools were cut. We cut teachers. Now we have classrooms bursting at the seams. She says, I have too many students, not enough computers for my tech class, and the computers we do have are quickly becoming outdated. You've had a day to think about it, Johnny, if you were the finance minister or the premier. Which one of these is resonating with you?
I'm a future guy, so I agree with people who are talking about education, investing in green energy, anything that's and even saving a bit. You were talking about that yesterday. Like, do we have to blow the whole shebang? Like,
well, Alberta took on a lot of, they call it like the short-term debt. I mean, every province did. And, the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, it's like, it's not the sexiest thing to do, to put money in there. But then when you don't put money in there, like over the last 15 years, then people say, why the fuck didn't we put any money in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund? And then they'd use the Norway comparison, and then experts' heads explode because they say that it's apples and oranges. But the point is, when you're high on the hog, like Alberta, like we don't forget that we were running deficits of almost the same size like a year ago, right? So we shouldn't forget these, as they say, strikes and gutters. These are the strikes. But when you're throwing strikes, what are you going to do with it? And what comes across as prudent is the word that I used yesterday. I think paying off a bit of debt is smart because
for sure.
Debt service costs a lot out of budgets. I say as I'm rolling with a huge credit card balance in my personal life.
I think we all.
Not huge, but you know what I mean. Bigger than it should be. But debt service, we all understand. That's keeping it real. Debt service is a real thing. And so, yeah, we should pay down debt. But also, yes, how do you not fund senior support? Someone on here, I don't have the comment in front of me, said something like, more of this funding and support needs to go to the people that are surviving on the streets. Mm-hmm. How do you argue against that? So we appreciate your comments. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. If you want to maybe spend some more time thinking about this and form your thoughts into an email, we invite you to do that over the weekend. And when we're back next Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, we'll be getting into some of what you have to say. Next week's going to have some barn burning shows. We're really looking forward to that. Trash Talk's coming up in just a second. First, I love to imagine the types of audience members that'll draw into this show to watch somebody like astrophysicist Katie Mack. I bet you there's a lot of engineers watching today, maybe listening to the podcast for the first time. If you're dissatisfied where you're working, if you don't have that career fulfillment, if you know that you have potential that's not being reached, today's a perfect day to check out apexautomation.ca. You can check out what they do, automation, fabrication, engineering. They've got some amazing projects. They're constantly growing down into the United States. They're going to be taking on projects around the world, and that means they are always hiring. Their careers link is worth 5 minutes of your time at apexautomation.ca. Hey friends, it's September 1st, and that means that it's 15% off all grocery purchases over $75 at the 16 Friesen Brothers locations across the province of Alberta. Yo, Hinton, we're coming for you. Whether you're in Fort Saskatchewan, like where John's often out, oftentimes people are talking about Fort Saskatchewan's pizza ovens. South Edmonton, how about the Friesen Brothers in some of the smaller communities that we don't show a lot of love to all the time, right? They all offering 15% off today only, the first of the month, on grocery purchases over $75. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. I'm going to be hitting the road in my Dodge Ram 1500 Longhorn. The best part about it, well, I don't know if I have to pick, the climate controlled inside. John, they have the cooled leather seats. Nothing better than that. If we're going to keep it real on this show, you're driving in hot temperature. You get that sweat behind your kneecap. You know what I'm talking about? It is the worst, but not when you have the comforts that come with Dodge's premium lineup. It's also got those step sides up and down like aircraft. Well, hey, love that stuff. And of course, the crew cab. That means everybody's got the leg room they need. The Dodge Ram is Motor Trend's Truck of the Year for 3 years in a row for good reason, and you won't find a better deal on them or better selection than you will at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Our friends at Dairy Queen want to remind you that this is perfect weather to build a Dairy Queen cake, maybe a blizzard cake. You can check it all out online at dqcakes.com, or you can, of course, go see them in person at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. That's the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And John, finally, let's get into our Twitter mentions. We got this cool one just the other day from a Real Talker. He's a Kubi Energy customer. He's got solar panels up on his roof.
Yeah.
Check this out. I loved when Real Talkers share their real life experiences with us. This is the best. Terry Cordy says, literally money from the sky. It's been a good solar power year. He shows us proof that he just got a refund for $550, and that's because his solar system installed by Kubi Energy is producing even more than they told him it would. Very cool stuff. Terry, one of the smartest decisions he says he's ever made. KubiEnergy.ca today is where you can get your free quote. I always love seeing people write in, real life people using their real names from their real email accounts or their real Twitter accounts, saying we're a customer of a business that supports Real Talk. You told us they would save us money, and they're saving us money. That's awesome stuff.
Feels good.
You got big plans for the long weekend?
I don't, actually. Well, you know me. Summer's almost over. Events are almost over. I've been hustling hard on the weekends. Got a private party tomorrow, then a wedding on Sunday at Alberta Beach. That should be nice. But then I'll take the Monday to reset.
Yeah. Burn some incense.
You're going to have a little road trip with our friend Andrew.
Yeah. Andrew Walker and I are going to be heading out to our annual. It's our 25th annual fantasy hockey draft. Yeah, and I'm in an interesting position.
Been doing it since you were 15.
Yeah, exactly. And I was I'm the Buffalo Bills of the Fantasy Hockey League. I've been to the finals 4 times and I've lost 4 times.
This is a keeper league.
It's a keeper league, and so a while ago I said I got to rebuild the team, and so I went really young. Right, so I got like Brady Tkachuk, Matt Tkachuk, Tim Stutzla. If you're a hockey fan, you know these are great young players. Evan Bouchard, Tristan Jarry, and then I had a couple opportunities in the summer to just take the train off the tracks and get Sidney Crosby and Patrick Kane, and I'm like, I gotta do it. So now all of a sudden I'm out there to win. I'm hungry to win my first cup, so we'll see how draft goes. It's going to be a great Labor Day weekend, I know, for everybody that's been celebrating getting the kids back to school, people that are maybe squeezing in a couple final campfires before the end of the summer. We want to thank those of you that are taking Real Talk on the road, catching up on podcasts that you may have missed. When you do, or when you're gathering with your friends over the Labor Day weekend, let them know which podcast you're listening to. Let them know they can subscribe on YouTube or wherever they get their podcasts. You have no idea how much that means to us. And of course, sign up for our Real Talk Sunday message if you haven't already. It's free, of course. It's a weekly email that I send out on Sunday nights, and I let you know maybe some of the highlights from the week that was and some of the highlights in the week to come, plus other details about things we're excited to support, like Be More Kind Day, Sunday, September 11th. Again, I want to remind you we're matching donations. What I mean is our team at Real Talk, and then my buddy, Chad Fletcher, his team at Ronan Consulting Group. We're going to match donations up to $1,000 at boylestreet.org. Make sure when you make your donation, you mention Be More Kind. We wrap up every week here on Real Talk, thanks to our friends at Local Environmental Services, with an opportunity to blow off a little steam, to say here what you might not say elsewhere. These are real emails received to talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's an exercise we call Trash Talk. All right, we got this one from Shelley, who says, Ryan Jesperson, I have now watched Real Talk 6 or 8 times. I thought you would be an honest, non-biased talk show. You are way too liberal for me. That's not why I want to listen to a fair, non-biased talk show. Number one, when you have Charles Adler on, who I used to listen to, talking about how Canada is not a dictatorship, I know you are very liberal. Also, Pierre Polyev comment, his regarding, Freeland, where you say he made it all about himself, that was not insulting whatsoever. You have given that redneck in Grand Prairie attention that is way over the top. That is exactly what he wants, and you have just continued to fuel his arrogant, nasty video. Also, you have not admitted that this is not just an Alberta problem, it is a Canada problem. I suggest you be less biased. It's not what the average listener wants. Constant bias. I hope you have a great day, and I think about how you portray yourselves to your listeners, and maybe you should do the same. That from Shelley, who says, I love Canada, but not how our government is governing today. Ooh-wee. Shelley, thanks for your email. How about this one from Brian, who says, after watching that last leadership debate, the main issue with the United Conservative Party's leadership race is that the so-called front-runners sound to be by a wide margin the absolute craziest. He says this is clearly the GOP playbook from the States, the American Trump populist politics. It's not good for the party, and it's not good for Albertans. That from Brian. How about this one from Jody, who says, memo to Grand Prairie Mayor Jackie Clayton, if you're going to over and over again say that your city is a conservative city, then you're giving credence to the actions of that individual because he lives in a, quote, conservative city. She's talking about Elliot McDavid that accosted the deputy PM. Jody says, you are doing the, quote, our citizens don't agree with the federal government. They hate Trudeau. They don't like Freeland. So I'm really sorry that happened. But please remember, we are a conservative city. Jody says that is utter bullshit. And this one to wrap from Robert, who says, here's some real talk. I was born and raised in Grand Prairie. Is everybody up there an entitled wannabe tough guy that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag driving around in their jacked up dually pickup? He says people not from there should also know that Dimsdale is not a place. It's a mistake on a map. If you drive to Dimsdale, all you will find is diesel and disappointment. To Mr. McDavid of Dimsdale, first of all, consider a name change. The McDavids don't you tarnishing their glorious family name. I know all of the McDavids up there are ashamed of you, including your own mom. Oh boy. Stop tarnishing the names of the good people of my hometown. We are ashamed of you. Either do yourself a favor and send off for an ancestry DNA test, find out where your ancestors came from, and to borrow a phrase from you and your self-entitled prick friends, go back to where you came from. Peace out. That from Robert. You can send your trash talks into talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's better for your blood pressure if I vent on your behalf. This is presented every Thursday or Friday, if that's the last day of our week, by Local Environmental Services. We're off Friday, we're off Monday, back live Tuesday, just after Labor Day. We can't wait to catch up with you then. Thanks for making Real Talk part of your routine. Peace!